Hello and welcome to another HanDrinksSolo wine info video, and today we are discussing the Piekenierskloof Grenache Noir 2021. Now the name Piekenierskloof can cause some confusion because Piekenierskloof Wines is a private company that makes some really rather delicious wines from the wine region of the Piekenierskloof. It is both a wine label and also a wine appellation. Now the Piekenierskloof is in the Cape Winelands on the southern tip of the African continent. It's about 180 kilometers north of the city of Cape Town, which is a 2-hour drive straight through the heart of the Swartland. But for any passionate grape hunter, it is thoroughly worth the drive because not only is the Piekenierskloof insanely beautiful, but it also happens to be the home to some of South Africa's best kept wine treasures. The name Piekenierskloof means soldier's gorge when roughly translated from Dutch. And this name comes from the fact that in the 16 and 1700s, the Dutch East India Company came down to the Cape of Good Hope at the bottom of Africa in order to set up a refreshment station for ships sailing round the bottom of the continent. While they were establishing their base there, they also needed to protect certain roads and routes around the region. And so they would station Piekeneers on these routes in order to protect travelers. One of these routes was up onto the Piekenierskloof Plateau. These soldiers rather enjoyed their surroundings and the relaxed setting and the beautiful sunsets, and in fact that they were a little bit further away from all those annoying barking orders from their military overlords. And so over time, and as the need for security dropped, they decided to try their hands at agriculture instead of soldiering. Now, if we fast forward roughly 200 years and change, we get to the 1920s when the Van Zyl family first settled in the region. Then you fast forward another 35 years or so in the 50s and 60s to when the first vines were planted, and then the first winery was built in the town of Citrusdal, and you have what is the making, or at least the first seeds of what would go on to become Piekenierskloof wines. In fact, if you look on the label of the Piekenierskloof wines range, you'll see a number of little hand-drawn figurines, and these are hand-drawn representations of those original protectors of the gorge. Today, Piekenierskloof Wines is still run by the Van Zyl family, and they have a lovely little tasting room in the town of Citrusdal. But then again, if you have a bottle of the amazing Piekenierskloof Grenache Noir 2021 in your hand, who needs a tasting room? Let's give this guy a sniff. So, as is so often the case with great Grenache, there is a whole lot of stuff to offer on the nose. There's everything from strawberry jam to fresh red plums to fresh tilled earth, raspberries, and even a little bit of fennel. And then for those of you who grew up in South Africa, there's a very nostalgic note, which is that of those small little pink musk sweets. There's a lovely, almost floral confection note. Now at this point, when we're trying to figure out what exactly we smell on the nose, we need to note that the wine is matured for 12 months in oak. But you might say, but Han, I don't smell any oak. I don't smell coconut or caramel or chocolate or smoke. And I'd say, well, that's mostly because that wasn't the winemaker's intention. These are larger barrels, 500 liters, and they're also very, very old oak. So actually the effect on the wine is really more about oxidation than imparting any specific vanillins or lactones into the wine. When we move on to taking a sip, well, if you looked at the label and saw the alcohol of 13%, you may have already expected a slightly lighter style of Grenache, especially because some of those Grenaches can get quite high in alcohol. But I'm not sure you would have been expecting the absolute wash of delightfully fresh, juicy red fruit that you're getting. As we mentioned earlier, there's raspberries and red plum, but there's also lovely, vibrant red cherry and pomegranate. It really is superbly fresh. And there's texture too, especially towards the end. So the tannins, obviously they are nothing like you would expect from a bigger wine like a Cabernet Sauvignon. But there's this mouth-drying texture still that's almost like chewing on the pith of a blood orange. The tannins are fairly fine, but they still give the wine lovely texture. And then there are also those slightly sweeter confected elements like the strawberry jam we mentioned and the pink musk sweets, and even a sort of red licorice element with a salty edge to it, which is triggered by the process of putting the wine in old barrels where micro-oxygenation can occur. Then you might also ask, okay, Han, but this is still Grenache, which is a medium acid cultivar at best, and it's quite a hot region. How do we get this amazing freshness and acidity on it? Well, part of the reason is because the vines were planted in 1973, and as I mentioned in other videos, old vines seem to ripen a little differently to young vines. And what happens is even at a chemical level, they manage to somehow reach the same physiological level of ripeness that perhaps a younger vine would, and yet they do it while maintaining far higher levels of their natural acidity. If you were just after tasting notes and some background info, then that's pretty much all there is for you. But if you have the stomach for it, pour yourself another glass, because I have 3 more reasons why you should go hunting down more wines from the Piekenierskloof wine region. The first reason is a combination of geographical isolation and its viticultural history. What you find there today is a fascinating mix of cultivars like Pinotage and Grenache and Cinsault and Old Vine Chenin. And perhaps if they had been closer to a bustling metropolis, you might have had all of those vines grubbed up in the name of progress and market forces. And yet, because it is a little more removed and isolated, there was less of that and more of a sense of things just being allowed to stay where they are. The second reason actually predates the first reason, and that is the planting of the vineyards. In this region, the cultivars seem to be chosen with a certain level of viticultural wisdom, in that these cultivars that I've been listing are particularly drought resistant, and they have a track record of surviving in rather dry climates. What you'll find up there is, as I said, Grenache Noir, Grenache Blanc, Cinsault, Chenin Blanc, and even a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon. All of those able to survive fairly harsh conditions. The third reason is that the Piekenierskloof Plateau sits up at a very healthy 700 meters above sea level. So we've talked about clever cultivars being planted, and that the fact that they were so isolated meant they kind of were left to their own devices, and you've got this rich glut of old vines. Now you add to the fact that it has a healthy dose of high altitude, which in turn triggers lovely big diurnal range in the region, which in turn triggers far more complexity in the end wines. These 3 reasons, when combined, form, in my mind, a fairly watertight argument for why Piekenierskloof wines are worth hunting down. So that's all we have time for today. But if you enjoyed this video, or if you want to learn more about viticulture or wine history or unusual cultivars or some of the rising winemaking stars coming out of the South African winelands, then subscribe to the HanDrinksSolo YouTube channel, where I publish at least 6 videos each month.